enlivened. Maybe you're like, so some of you have done quite a lot of practice with me in the past, so maybe there's a sense of like settling in. Maybe some of you are thinking, how on earth am I going to survive 2.5 hours of yoga? Maybe you might be wondering what's going to happen next. Coming back, settling in, this kind of, oh, what comes up for me? What comes up for me? Maybe you've had a really lovely weekend. Or maybe you're feeling miserable and isolated. What comes up for you right now in terms of how you're feeling within? So within is the physicality of within. And there's emotions, mind states. How am I doing? Just a few more moments, this kind of process, practice, checking in. How am I doing? And then the eyes are closed, just gently raise the eyelids, and eventually let's bring our feet to the front and come off what you might have been sitting on, please. Come off what you've been sitting on. So definitely feel free to communicate with Paula and myself by the chat bar. So I just saw someone putting in a line about, I think it was interference. So Helena just put something in. So Paula is the tech support, so she can come in and help you. If you've got questions around how a posture might be modified or you want some specific advice, again, feel free to come in on the chat bar. And what I have to the right here is a large projector screen, which helps me to see communication. And sometimes you might see I'm looking out to the left, and that's simply to give my eyes a bit of a rest from looking at the screen. So what we're going to do from here, so we're going to come and we're going to lie on our backs, please. What I would like everyone to do is to have something below their heads. So maybe you have a blanket or a cushion. So something is below your head. And then what I'd like you to have is a belt, whether it's a dressing gown belt or maybe a yoga belt, and that is by your right hip. And then what we're going to do, we're going to lie down in this posture called constructive rest. So the knees are raised, the feet are flat on the floor. The belt is by the right hip, the right hand. The head is on a pillow. So you're staying in constructive rest, and I'm coming up to sitting, simply because it's easier for me to talk while sitting. So you're staying in constructive rest. I'm coming up to sitting. So remember those points about, say, a support below the head. The belt, whatever way you're manifesting a belt this afternoon. I know for a few of you it's not the afternoon, it's the morning. But something is by your right side that you could use as a belt. Maybe you have a yoga belt. And then, I talked very briefly, I talked about kind of paying attention. And as well as paying attention, can we use this practice to nourish ourselves? So paying attention, and in the practice, can we encourage what you might describe as ease? Can we be practicing with kindness? So from here, from constructive rest, a suggestion is you take your feet as wide as your mat and you let the knees fall in. So the knees are touching. Definitely feel free to put on extra tops. So the knees are touching. It's one of the many pluses of yin yoga. Feel free to wear as many clothes as you like. So the knees are touching. The feet are as wide as the mat. And then paying attention. For maybe some of you, this does not feel that comfortable. And maybe your preference is to go back to say the feet as wide as the hips and the knees also as wide as the hips. There are many options. I sometimes describe the way I'm teaching as many maybes. And particularly when we're practicing in this way, the way of being physically separate and yet connected by screens, by devices, I think it's even more important the inner teacher. Remember, I'm here to support your inner teacher in terms of, if you've got any particular questions, feel free to go in on the chat bar. If you've got any questions, any technological questions, Paula is the tech support. By taking the feet as wide as the mat and the knees falling in, this is putting the hips into a little bit of internal rotation. And a lot of the poses we do in a yoga practice are external rotation of the hips. So personally, I think it's a good practice to maximize poses we're doing less. So internal rotation there. And then just see if you can allow some release. So the body being supported. You know, I think this is a great pose, constructive rest. Lying on your back, the head is pillowed. Great way of bringing ease to so Paula, if you could go in on the chat bar and answer Stephanie, please, that would be great. So great way of bringing ease to the body, ease to the body. So the lower back can release. The back is stable. The head is pillowed. So allowing and ease. These are what you might describe as yin qualities. I collect what I call my first ever yin experience. So maybe some of you do have interesting first ever yin experiences. So if you do, definitely feel free to email me. I was just going to read you a line or two from someone that she was talking about her first ever yin experience. And she said, the idea of not pushing or pulling myself to go deeper blew my mind. I came from a dance background and I almost saw it as a waste of time if I wasn't stretching past my limits. The idea of not pushing or pulling blew my mind. We're just going to spend a few more moments in constructive rest. Which, in my opinion, is a neglected yoga pose. It's a great way of emphasizing the importance of rest, good way of easing the lower back. And then what we're going to do from constructive rest, we're going to do some poses. We're going to stay on our backs, please. So say if you're pregnant and you're practicing, so very welcome to be here. If you're pregnant and you're practicing, modify as you need to. So I know sometimes if a woman's pregnant, lying on her back for a while might start to feel uncomfortable. So if that's true for you, then you could always lie on your side as an example. If you've taken the feet as wide as the mat, now shuffle the feet in so they're as wide as the hips, please. So the feet are as wide as the hips, the knees are as wide as the hips, have the heels as close as you can to the hips, and now hug the right knee into the chest, please. Hug the right knee into the chest. And then once you've hugged the right knee into the chest, so the left foot stays flat on the floor, please. Hugging the right knee to the chest. And then having hugged the right knee into the chest, let's do some ankle rotatings. Rotate that right foot, just kind of rotating the right foot, please. Rotating the right foot. So ankle rollings, you could call this. There is a lovely practice, I'm sure some of you have done this, where I can't remember his name, it's something like Mukasana, something like that. You kind of go through all the joints, moving all the joints. It's a lovely practice. So observe which direction you're rolling that right foot. Change direction, please. Change direction. And then bring the right foot into stillness. So being yin in yin. So some of you have done a lot of yin. For some of you, you're less familiar. It's a very common mistake when you've done other forms of yoga and then you come into a yin practice and it's almost like you practice yin with that Ashtanga approach or Vinyasa approach. So very important, yin in yin. So bearing that in mind, taking your belt or whatever you have to hand, place it around the right foot and now ease the right foot to the sky. If you do not have a belt, of course you can use your hands. You just hold somewhere behind the back of the right leg. If you have a belt, what I would encourage, remember I talked a little bit about ease, kindness. What I'd encourage is you have your elbows on the ground. What I wonder is that by having the elbows on the ground, this might be a way to be a little less, what's the word, striving. So instead of trying to achieve the right leg closer to the upper body, keeping the elbows on the ground, so there's more of an ease. And then paying attention. And when we pay attention, this can be a way of releasing what you might describe as the conceptualizing mind. And particularly in these days, it's like, what's going to happen next? There can be this great uncertainty, anxiety. And I think it's important for us to consider what's going to happen. But it's also important for us to be here as much as we can. So we can use our bodily sensations as a way of anchoring our awareness, encouraging us to be more here. So as we come into the last minute, we're just going to be here for another minute. What I'd like you to do, just kind of almost like looking inside that right leg, noticing where do I feel sensations strongest in that right leg? So that's the question. It's a kind of what you might describe as an open question. Where are sensations strongest in that right leg? And then being skillful in what you're doing. So ensuring that the stretch stays within what you can stay with. So not the struggle. The stretch is, we could talk about within boundaries of being bearable. So just a few more moments, staying still, please, staying still. And then from here, what happens from here? When we change shape, we also change the site of strong sensation. So release the belt, place the belt by your left side. Come now into a posture called eye of the needle. You place your right foot over your left knee. So there's loads of space in between the two thighs. If you're in North America, you might be calling this pose figure of four. Whether you're calling it figure of four or eye of the needle, what I'd like everyone to do, so keep the left foot on the floor, please. This is slow yoga. So the left foot stays on the floor, please. What I'd like you to do is to be engaging that right foot. So by engaging, there's a level of flexion in the right foot. So that means the toes are drawing towards the shin. Though avoid the engaging, the flexion of the foot being so strong it makes your toes feel tense. So again, being skillful, we're looking for engagement without causing even more tension. So we all experience tension. Let's be realistic. We all have anxiety. The question is, in our practices, can we be using practice as a way of releasing some of the tension, alleviating some of the anxiety? And now from here, taking your time, maybe you're really relishing this permission to keep your left foot on the floor. In which case, feel free to keep the left foot on the floor. Or maybe some of you do have a lot of mobility in your external mobility in your hips and you wish to thread the needle. So feel free to thread the needle. So that would be the right hand in between the thighs. You could hold your left thigh. You could hold your left shin. You could be using a belt if you wish. So in the yin yoga practice, stillness. So rather than what you might sometimes describe as postural extremism, the focus is much more on staying still. So bearing that in mind, just going to be here for a little bit less than a minute. Really kind of check in for yourself. It's like, can you stay with it? Is it getting too strong? If it's getting too strong, then ease away from the edge. But the key, so in yin, we look for stillness. There's a staying in the shapes. So these are what we might describe as characteristics of the yin yoga practice: stillness, staying. That what we experience is rather the kind of extreme edge, we can stay with it. So now from here, if you have raised that left foot, so notice that word if you've raised that left foot, now bring the left foot to the floor, please. And then cross your right thigh over your left thigh, please. So the left foot stays on the floor. you've crossed your right thigh over your left thigh. Now, say if you're here and you're pregnant, I would recommend you keep the left foot on the floor. Say if you're here and your energy levels are very low, it could be a better idea to keep the left foot on the floor. So you're very welcome to keep the left foot on the floor. Or maybe you might like to draw the thighs towards the upper body, thus lifting the left foot off the floor. So you could hold like around the back of the thighs, you could hold your feet. If you can, keeping the head on the ground, please. You could use a belt. So doing what you need to do. So this is kind of principle, we could call it the principle of the, rather than the postures being imposed on the practitioner, we're using these poses as ways of like almost like paths into this body. So of course you can keep the left foot on the floor. Of course you can hold your feet. A friend of mine, he calls it, when you're holding the feet, he calls it something like handlebar posture. So this is a bit like an upside down Gomukhasana. This is a great way, if you feel any soreness in your base back area, your sacroiliac joint, this can be a great way of accessing that area. And now from here, if you've raised the left foot off the floor, now bring the left foot back to the floor. And now bring the right foot also flat to the floor. Just take a few breaths. Both feet flat on the floor. So the feet as wide as the hips, the knees as wide as the hips. We're kind of tuning into this body. There was, I think he was French, a French philosopher. He would talk about something about the lived in experience of flesh. So of course we get drawn away. Maybe you're wondering what you're going to have for dinner. Or perhaps you're thinking, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Coming back into this body, so we've just been moving the right hip in more directions than the left hip. We're going to change sides in a few moments. Just kind of see if you can feel any particular difference between the two sides. And now changing sides. So hug the left knee to the chest. Just on a technical point. So I talked about soreness in the back, and another area that can be sore is around, in fact, Alison is doing this. Alison is obviously telepathic. So if you've got discomfort in your knee, what you could do is you could bring your hands into the back. So essentially you're closing it. This is a bit confusing to anyone. You could look at me for a moment. I'm modeling it, sitting up. And you bring your hands into the back of your knee and you close your upper leg around upper leg and the lower leg. So this might be helpful if you've got discomfort in the knee. And then let's do the ankle rollings, please. So rolling, rotating that left foot. I notice for myself when I do this exercise, it seems to happen more on this side, the left side, than on the right side. Sometimes little pops or something like that happens. Just kind of rolling that left foot. Observe the direction you're personally rolling your left foot. Change direction, please. And then bring the foot into stillness. So yin in yin. So these qualities of staying. So in a vinyasa practice, we're in a posture for maybe 20, 30 seconds at most. In a yin practice, it's much more a matter of minutes. This feeling of ease. So not trying to do a kind of the posture, trying to get the hamstrings ever longer. So if you have a belt to hand, placing that around the left foot, Easing the left foot to the sky, easing the left foot to the sky. So personally, for myself, both in my own practice and in terms of teaching, it's rather about, say, as an example, trying to like lengthen hamstrings. I'm much more intrigued by practice as this almost like a portal helping me to look at my relationship with self and my relationship with other and my relationship with, we could talk about resources. So elbows on the ground if you can. The easing of the left leg towards the upper body. And then as we were doing on the first side, can you noticing, oh, where do I feel this stretch? So that's paying attention. Where do I feel? So the lived in experience of the left leg. Maybe you're feeling around the back of the knee or the mid thigh. There are certainly examples of, well, I'm not really feeling anything. And then when someone says that to me, and that is a very valid, if that's your experience, that's your experience. And then what I might respond is like, well, just keep looking. Just keep looking. So we're here for one more minute. Maybe another minute's too much for you. Ease away from the edge. Maybe you're feeling really comfortable. You could continue as you are, or maybe, and this certainly happens when we've been in a pose for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, you might think, well, actually, I can feel a little bit more space. And then maybe you make the stretch a little bit stronger, but this key characteristic of like staying still. So just a few more moments, staying still, please. And then from here, taking your time, we're going to come out of, I call this foot to sky. You might know it as, was it Supta Padangusthasana? We're going to come into Eye of the Needle, whether you're calling it Eye of the Needle or Figure of Four. What we're all going to begin, remember from the first side, we're all going to begin keeping the right foot on the floor. So this is slow yoga. And then I was just going to read you a few lines from a poem by Donna Martin. Maybe a few of you have come across her work. When I need some balance, the sound of silence sings its song and carries me so gently to a land beyond its right or wrong. And when I need uplifting to rise above heart heaviness, a sense of joyful gratitude can bring a smile of happiness. But when I am too weary to hear the song of silence sing, when whispers stop, no smile, no joy, I rest into just noticing. So remembering that exercise I said right at the start about just something you might feel grateful for. You know, gratitude is as much a muscle as the hips or the hamstrings. You know, we can exercise that muscle. And then this practice of just noticing, like we were doing in the foot to sky, just noticing where you felt that strongest in the left leg. So I'm going to be here for 2 more minutes. Choosing for yourself, maybe you decide to keep the right foot on the floor. Very well, you can keep the right foot on the floor. Maybe you're threading the needle. Of course, you can use a belt to thread your needle. Maybe you're holding around your right thigh. Maybe you're holding your right shin. Maybe you brought the left foot so it's tucking into your right armpit. I'm not yet seen evidence that shows having extreme levels of hip rotation connects to happiness. What I do believe is that the more we can actually practice being present, the more we can have like this lived-in experience of flesh, being this body, at the same time turning down the dial on the judgments and the kind of the inner critic, the happier we can be. So we're here for another minute, just noticing. Can you stay? Do you need to ease from the edge? Could you perhaps bring that left foot a little bit closer to the right armpit? And then in terms of just noticing, could you notice a difference? Is this side more mobile or less mobile? Do you have more external rotation in the left hip, this side, or the right hip? Just noticing. And then just a few more moments, staying as still as you can, please. So if you have raised your left foot, your right foot, now bring that right foot to the floor and then cross the left thigh over the right thigh. So thighs crossed and closed. And remember on the first slide, I talked about, this is almost like an upside down version of a pose. Some of you would know it as Gomukhasana. In the yin practice, we sometimes call this shoelace. So initially, we're all going to keep the right foot on the floor. So remembering those points from the first side. So say if you're pregnant, it might be a good idea to keep the right foot on the floor. If your energy levels are low, because when our energy levels are low, this can mean we're more liable to say injury because simply we're not so able to pay attention. You know, there's a complete connection between energy levels and our ability to be attentive. So maybe you decide, give yourself that permission. This is, I sometimes call this permissive yoga. Give yourself permission to keep the right foot on the floor, or maybe you're drawing the thighs towards the upper body. So holding wherever you wish to hold. So you could be holding your right shin, your left shin. You could be holding your feet. And that point from the first side, so movement definitely is like, I see it as like medicine for the body. And in terms of moving, it's like helping us for our healing. But sometimes we can harm ourselves through movement. The difference between harming and healing is attention. It's also about letting go of the dogmas, letting go of the shoulds, really paying attention to this body, paying attention to this body. So as a suggestion, if you do experience any soreness in your low back, sacroiliac, the base of the back, this pose might be helpful. So now from here, let's release. Bring the feet back flat to floor. So we're going to do 3 more postures staying on our backs. And the first pose we're going to do is a reclining rotation. So what I'd like you to do, everyone, have your feet touching, your inner feet touching, also your inner knees touching. And now shift your hips just 5 centimeters over to your left. So this can be a way of lessening any strain into your lower back. And now bring your knees towards your right shoulder. So the knees come onto the ground, please. If the ground feels far away, or you'd like to make this a more what you might describe as a supportive or soothing or restoring practice, of course you could use like a pillow below your right knee on the ground, the right foot on the ground. Another way of doing this, you could place padding in between the right knee and the left knee, the right foot and the left foot. So those can be ways of making this more restoring. If you're pregnant, I would lessen the rotation, focus more on padding than say a stronger stretch. If you want a stronger stretch, so this is your practice, but in yin, remember being yin and yin, this is not a 60-meter sprint, this is much more a marathon. And in some ways, I feel that yin yoga is built for lockdown. Yin yoga is certainly built for Zoom because it's a fairly simple practice, and to teach an elaborate vinyasa sequence on Zoom can be really quite challenging. But if you wanted to make the stretch stronger, you can bring your knees closer to your right shoulder. You could also press your right hand into your left thigh. You could also, if you wish, you could wrap your left leg around your right leg. And then another suggestion is you could take your left arm behind you. So the left hand is stretching to the wall, depending wherever your wall might be. Or assuming you've got some space behind you, I'm sure a few of you do not have that space. So it's really kind of working with the material we have. So it's this point about choice. You're choosing. So you're choosing, do I go for a stronger stretch? Do I go for a softer stretch? It's not that one is right and the other is wrong. One is better, the other is worse. It's about paying attention, making the practice appropriate to where you actually are. We're going to be here for another minute. So wherever you are, doing what you need to do to ensure you're able to stay still. Stillness. So now from here, from this reclining rotation, slowly let's undo the rotation. So if, say, as an example, if you wrap your left leg around, releasing that wrapping, let's all come back up to center. So I'm defining center with the feet flat on the floor, the inner feet touching, the inner knees touching. Take a breath or two. So in this more kind of, call it a more neutral place. And now shift your hips 5 centimeters at most over to your right, Remember, shifting the hips over, just a way of like lessening perhaps any possible strain into your lower back. And then bring your knees towards your left shoulder. So as you bring the knees towards the ground, just kind of reiterate from the first side. So this is your practice. So maybe you're having plenty of space between the knees and the left shoulder. Maybe you're using padding, say below the left knee and the ground or in between the knees. Maybe you brought the knees fairly close to the shoulder, left shoulder. Maybe you've wrapped this side to be your right leg, would be wrapping around your left leg. Maybe the left hand is pressing into that thigh, the right thigh this side. And maybe you're taking the right arm back behind you. So by taking the right hand back behind, this is a way of accentuating the the stretch into the right armpit, the right shoulder. If you're doing that, just on a kind of, might describe it as a technical point, if you do that and then what you feel is a little bit of like maybe tingling, or how else could you describe it? Maybe pins and needles. So there can be different explanations for this. But I would tend to, if you're feeling like tingling sensations in the right shoulder, when you're reaching the right arm back, I would tend to bring the right hand down, because possibly that might be an indication of like maybe a nerve being trapped in the shoulder. And you know, maybe if we were just here for 20 or 30 seconds, maybe that might be kind of okay, but we're not. We're here for, we're doing this pose 3 minutes each side. So we're coming into the last minute. So again, choice. Use the skill of attention. Remember that, just noticing. And now be still. 1 more minute. And so now from here, slowly bring the knees back up. And then once you've brought the knees back up, what we're going to do now, we're going to do a posture, sometimes in the in practice, it's called banana asana. So what we do in banana asana, it's another name for it is half moon or crescent moon. What we do in banana asana is we lie flat on the floor, please. So the legs are flat on the floor, and then take the arms over the head and initially hold your elbows. So if you've got some little bit of, maybe a bit of sensitivity in your lower back, it might be better to keep hold of your elbows. Otherwise, take the arms away, so you're reaching the hands towards the back of whatever space you're in, and then holding your right wrist with your left hand, and then take the hands, so holding your right wrist with your left hand, now take the hands, the elbows and the shoulders over to your left. So we're doing a side bend. So the hands and shoulders over to the left. And then again, if there's sensitivity in your back, or if you're pregnant, I would suggest keeping the legs just as they are. If everything's fine in your back, then you could also take your legs over to your left. So you're holding your, so going over to your left. So you're holding your right wrist with your left hand, the legs have gone over to left. And then what I personally do is I now place my left foot, left ankle over my right ankle. That's what I personally do. But in the kind of greater scheme of things, it's not that super important. But we're side bending to our left, Maybe you can pull quite actively with that left hand on that right wrist, so thus accessing like the right arm, the right armpit, to side bending to the left. If this is any discomfort for the lower back, so being conscious of the lower back, because what we're doing here is both a mild extension of the lower back and also this lateral movement of the spine. And Sometimes if there's a bit of discomfort in the lower back, this is not such a good idea. So then you keep your legs straight. Just a few more moments if you can. Remember, if it's feeling too much, ease away from the edge, ease away from the edge. And then from here, slowly, let's release. Come back to center, come back to center. Take a moment to just simply lying flat on the floor, lying flat on the floor. So this is an asymmetrical pose. We can use the first side to inform what we do in the second side. So if you came out the first side, you're a bit like, whoa, that felt quite strong, that kind of side bending felt quite strong. Then bring that into the equation for the second side. So remember, you're very welcome to hold your elbows, or maybe you're reaching your arms behind you. So this side, you'd be holding your left wrist with your right hand. And now shifting over to the right. So the hands lead, then the elbows, and then the shoulders. So shifting over to the right. And then if everything feels fine with your lower back, you then take your legs over to your right. So the legs will be going over to the right. And then what I would personally, my own tendency here, is to bring my right foot over my left foot. So pressing down. So side bending. So if you're a bit confused by instructions, feel free to go in on the chat bar and say, please explain again. So we're side bending. Remember, if there's any discomfort in your lower back, then ease from that edge. So the key is kind of keep coming back to this idea of staying still. Pins and needles and shoulders, thank you. So pins and needles and shoulders, hold your elbows. And if that's not working, have your hands reaching out wide. Just see if you can side. So we're looking to kind of side bend the upper body. So if there's any kind of pins and needles in the shoulders, then try either holding your elbows or just having the hands out wide. So now from here, so not yet moving, just take a moment, really kind of, okay, paying attention to this body. So in the yin practice, we can do a lot of forward bending and some back bending. We don't do so much like lateral movement. So really kind of noticing for yourself where you're experiencing this strongest in the body. So this kind of paying attention to the body. Okay, I'm here because I'm paying attention to the body. And now we'll call it straightening the bananas. So straightening a banana. And then we're going to do one more pose on our backs. And remember that point from earlier, you know, if you're pregnant and this isn't working for you, then you could come up to sitting as an example, because the pose we're going to do is reclining butterfly. Some of you will know this as Supta Baddha Konasana. So what we do in reclining butterfly is we bring the soles of our feet together and we let our knees fall out wide. Definitely feel free. So I was doing this posture myself this morning. It's a lovely pose. It's stretching of the inner thighs, external rotation here. So it's another good pose that can be helpful for your lower back if you experience discomfort in your lower back. The closer you bring the heels to the hips, the stronger the stretch can be. The further away you take the heels, that can be a way of turning down the dial. Definitely feel free to say have a bolster below the knees or bricks to support the thighs. And then what we're going to do in this pose, so reclining butterfly, and if it's not working for you, you can have your legs straight. But what we're going to do in this pose we're going to do a breathing exercise. So if you can, lying on your backs, please. What I tend to prefer is having the hands by the hips rather than the hands out wide, just to kind of like almost like minimize what's happening. So we focus much more on the movement around the hips. We're going to do this breathing exercise. And what I want to emphasize is that prioritize your own experience. Like, let go of the textbooks. This is not about Instagram. Prioritize your own experience. So if you explore this exercise and you feel physical discomfort, any kind of agitation, let go of the exercise. Let go of the exercise. Some of you have done this before. The exercise is sometimes called coherent breathing. We're approximately equalizing our in-breath with our out-breath, and we're breathing in for 6 seconds, we're breathing out for 6 seconds. So wherever we might be, whether we're in the UK, whether we're beyond the UK, whether we're within the M25, whether we're outside the M25, let's all be breathing together. Just in your own way, let's all now be taking an inhale, breathing in, please. And then breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in without strain. Breathing out. Can you feel the release of the exhale? Breathing in, so without any physical discomfort. Breathing out. Again, feel the release. Breathing in. So if it's straining, just go to slow breath. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. So you're very welcome to have the legs simply flat on the floor. Breathing in. Breathing out. 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 Breathing in. So as best as you can, trying to maintain that form of breathing, that way of breathing. So coherent breath. If you're particularly interested in this way of breathing, if you're unfamiliar with it, do feel free to email me through my website and I can send you more details. It's a practice that I do for myself every day, and I found it really useful in terms of like grounding and calming, which are obviously qualities we require in current circumstances. So what we're going to do from here, what I'd recommend is you use your hands to help. So bring your hands to your outer thighs and just lift the knees up. And what we could do is we could come back just for a few breaths, back into the constructive rest with the feet as wide as the mat and the knees touching. So just as a way of reversing that external rotation of the hips, we could take the feet as wide as the mat, the knees touching, and then checking in. Remember how we did this right at the start. Checking into the material for yourself right now, because maybe you're in this posture, constructive rest, and you're like, whoa, this feels so good. If that's your response to this pose, give yourself permission to stay. So give yourself permission to stay in constructive rest if it really resonates with your experience right now. If you're going to come up out of constructive rest, what I would suggest, so this is a suggestion, see if you can experience the body breathing. Remember that exercise we were just doing. Could you notice any difference between the right nostril and the left nostril? Sometimes the difference is obvious. Sometimes the difference is imperceptible. If you can notice a difference and you're going to come up out of constructive rest, what I would like you to do is to roll to the side of the more active nostril. So say so I'm sitting up and I think my right nostril feels a little bit more active. So if I was lying down, I'd roll to my right. If you feel your left nostril is more active, you'd roll to the left. If I'm not really sure I can notice a difference, then simply roll to the right. And drawing the knees towards the chest, pillowing the head, because we've just spent a long time lying on our backs. Spent a long time in these poses, lying on our backs. So imagine maybe you're like a bear coming out of the cave. Hibernation. You're a bear coming out of the cave. And taking your time, slowly coming up to sitting, slowly, eventually coming up to sitting. And then so noticing those words, eventually and slowly coming up to sitting, what we're going to do next, we're going to do a sitting up version of that pose we were just doing. So butterfly. So what we do in butterfly, we have the soles of our feet together and you have a substantial space in between the hips and the heels. So one of the ways you could measure that space, you could take a yoga block. You can comfortably fit a yoga block in between the hips and the heels. If you do not have a yoga block, then 2 hands. So it's a big space, substantial space. It's like we're making this diamond. Hips, knees, heels. And then some of you will benefit from sitting on something. So say if you feel a bit of restriction around your hips, then sitting on something like a block or a cushion, or maybe you have that handy cookery book, sitting on something could give you that little bit of extra pelvic tilt. So you do not want to feel like you're going backwards. If that's your experience, then please sit on something. And then bring the hands to your bottom and draw this outwards. So for many years, I've been doing this. And I call this exercise, sometimes I call it grab and pull asana. So if you say it slowly, it makes a bit more sense. Grab and pull asana. So for many years, I've been doing it myself, grabbing and pulling my asana, and I've been telling other people to grab and pull their asanas. In the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I've changed. So if you're here, and I know this is definitely true for some of you, and you've got a lot of mobility in your body, if you're here and you experience any strain to your hamstrings, or if there's any soreness in your lower back, rather than grabbing and pulling your asana, I personally think it's better to dig it in. I sometimes call this GTI, gracefully tuck inwards. So I know this is clearly simplistic, but a good friend of mine who's highly mobile in the body, and being highly mobile in your body is not necessarily a plus, but we are what we are. And she's been going for the GTI option, and she says it's been really helpful. So if you've not come across this before, and you fall into, say, those categories of like a lot of mobility or some hamstring pull or soreness in your lower back, try the GTI option. And don't just try it for a Sunday afternoon, try it for like 3 months. And definitely feel free to email me after 3 months and say, well, I've been doing GTI and it really didn't help me. And that's fine, we're all individual. But this is a suggestion. So rather than grabbing and pulling your asana, then maybe the GTI option could be helpful. And then taking your index fingers and your thumbs, bring them down to your big toes. So feel free to continue wearing socks. You don't have to take your socks off. Let's just massage our big toes for a moment. Honestly, one of the delights of yoga for me has been connecting to my feet. Because in Northern European climates, how often do we see our feet? So let's go from our big toes, let's go along the inner arch of the feet. What's it technically called? The medial longitudinal arch, or MLA for short, medial longitudinal arch. So just kind of massaging the inner arch of the feet. And then let's come in the area in between the ankle and the Achilles tendon, the lower leg, and just kind of massage this area a little bit. And now just very slowly, this is the yin channel, the inner leg. So just the medial to the shin bone. Just very slowly, let's work our way up the yin channel. Just kind of giving ourselves just a little bit of massage. This is a way of really connecting the feeling of this body. And then when you eventually get up to the knee, let's just slowly come down. I've had people say to me, this is really painful. Why is that? And I'm like, I'm just a yoga teacher. I don't know. But various reasons that could explain discomfort, but just getting into this kind of feeling of like, just kind of massaging the yin channel. So yin is inner, yin is slower. Yin is also softer. And then eventually let's come back to the ankle. So just as a couple of other options from here, if you've done this practice a lot, so I know some of you have done this a lot, one of the ways you could alter the angle, so this only applies if you've done this a lot, is perhaps placing a block or something below the feet. And then maybe you have a bag of oats, place it on the feet. Or maybe some of you will have sandbags, placing it on the feet. So what I then feel is like grounding, being grounded. If placing a weight on your feet and you're a bit like, I don't like this, then remove it. And now bring the fingers just by the feet. Another great plus of practicing on Zoom is feel free to drink your tea while you're practicing. So, and another plus is I see pets come in and Vajra is asleep to my right. So slowly, maybe you could come a little bit further forward. So putting the back into flexion, so forward bend, soften the chin towards the chest. External rotation of the hips. Of course, you can use support below your thighs. Feel your way towards what you might describe as edge. Feeling your way. And then sometimes what can be interesting is to get to edge and then ease off slightly. Take a few breaths, just a little bit of easing off. So rather than just racing to the extreme, it's like being like, oh, it's almost like playing around at that edge, playing around at that edge. And then remembering the whole priority in yin yoga, it's like there's a longer lingering, that we stay. And then as you stay, so remember the breathing exercise. So the breath is paramount here. So if you've gone forwards and you're losing your breath, you need to ease from that edge. And then it's almost like, can you soften? Can you, like, say, soften the shoulders away from the ears? Can you soften the lips? And this is a piece of poetry by Mary Oliver that I think is very apt for the yin experience. Today I'm flying low and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple. So we're going to be here for 2 more minutes. Check into your material. If 2 more minutes is feeling too much, if your back is feeling a bit uncomfortable, you could always go into like reclining butterfly as an example. The key, stillness, one of the doors into the temple. So just now noticing, where is the mind? And maybe your mind was wondering, has a connection broken? Maybe your mind is planning tomorrow or worried about tomorrow. Just kind of noticing. And then from here, slowly, an inhale, that's the kind of stimulant for movement. Inhale, come up to center. And then once you've come to center, what I'd like you to do is take the hands behind you and bring the feet to the front. So just lean into the hands behind you. The feet come to the front. Noticing how this feels in the body. So there's a little bit of a reversing of the direction. So going forwards, that's flexion. So a little bit of back extension. And then we could also do the internal rotation of the hips. So feet to the width of the mat, knees falling in, knees falling in. If the strong sensations persist, that could show actually the edge was too much. And there's definitely this equation, I call it the wow to ow trajectory. So this has certainly happened for me. And I remember once being on a yoga retreat and doing these 4 bends in the afternoon. I was really like, wow, I am so bendy. And then waking up the next morning and the wow would become ow in the back of my thighs. So, you know, particularly if you're less familiar with the yin yoga practice, do err on the side of caution. So what we're going to do from here, we're going to come into a posture. Some of you would know this as dragonfly. So we take our legs wide apart. Some of you might know this better as Upavista Konasana. Of course, you're very welcome to sit on something, just giving yourself that little bit of pelvic tilt. If a woman's pregnant, I would prefer her not to do this pose because I think it might be a little bit too strong for like the groin, lower abdomen area. So if a woman's pregnant, what she could do is she could do something like this, where you're holding your ankles and you have your knees really bending like this. Or maybe you come back into doing butterfly. Other options here is you could always, if you have bricks, you could place the bricks below your knees. I sometimes just do this myself, this option, just as a way of doing things slightly differently. I think it's a really good practice to look for doing things differently. And then let's all begin with the hands behind. So sitting up. Breathing slowly. Maybe you have that kind of inner metronome. Maybe you're just focusing on a steadying of the breath. Remember, if you're particularly interested in that form of breathing, do feel free to email me for more details. And then checking in. So checking into this body. Another way you can do this pose, you can actually do dragonfly against the wall. You're welcome to do that if you wish. If there's any discomfort in your back, that could be a better option, because being yin in the yin, that means that the strongest stretch is from, like we could talk about, from the waist and below. That's the yin area of the body. Maybe some of you can bring your hands in front. Maybe some of you can just simply be leaning forwards, maybe. So being skillful, paying attention. Remember, so we all have this, you could call it the visceral experience of the staying. Being skillful. Remember that point from when we're in butterfly, you can ease towards edge, ease away from edge, feeling your way. So we connect within, and what I wish is that by connecting within, we can also connect with what is around. And this afternoon, this practice together, as you know, this is a practice where it's about giving our support to somewhere that needs support. We could almost call this community in action, connecting. And the more we can connect with each other, the more we can practice, you might call it solidarity, the stronger we can be to deal with the difficulty of what we're currently experiencing. And I really believe that by combining together, we're more able to positively and constructively change what we're experiencing. So just as an example of that, when there's that kind of common term, and it's funny, no one would have heard of it a few months ago, was it social distancing? I do not use the word social distancing. I use the word physical distance because, unfortunately, that is the reality. We need physical distance. But physical distance and social intimacy. So that's one of the reasons I suggested at the start of this afternoon's practice of like going in on the chat bar and saying your name, saying where you are, saying something you're grateful for. So that's an example of social intimacy. And for those who are teaching on Zoom, I'd really encourage you to use the chat bar as a way of initiating or supporting community. And I feel for myself, I've spoken more on the phone in the last like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, than I have in the last 25 years. I feel I've gone back to the 1980s. In the 1980s, I have all these memories of like, and the 1990s as well. But yeah, lots of chats on the phone. And that's what I've gone back to. So we have to acknowledge the reality of this unfortunate need for physical distance, but can we soften that isolation and really encourage social intimacy? So as we come into the last minute, practice intimacy with this experience of body. Be skillful in what you decide to do. And remember the key, stillness, one of the doors into the temple. So just a little bit less than a minute. So now from here, slowly, if you've gone into the flexion, ease your way up. If you're center, just stay center. So if you can, notice that word if you can, keeping the legs as they are, have the hands by the hips, take a breath or two. So if you can, keeping the legs as they are. And then, could you bring your right hand to your right knee and just lift that right knee up? And maybe you could also take hold of your right foot. So the left leg stays still. I think it's amazing just to be able to hold the right foot. Maybe some of you can lift that right foot off the floor. Maybe some of you could bring the right big toe to your nose. So this is clearly a useful life skill. We can bring our right big toe to our nose, just see what you could do. So perhaps just kind of picking it up a little bit. Just seeing if you can bring the big toe to nose. And now place that right foot against the inner left thigh. Place the right foot against the inner left thigh. So the left leg has stayed as it is, out to the left. The right foot against the inner left thigh. No discomfort into that right knee. So we put the right knee into flexion. So I'll give you 3 options. So one option is staying sitting up. So you're very welcome to stay sitting up. Another option, so we won't be here super long. Another option is to go down the middle. And then if you've got a lot of mobility in your body and a familiarity with the yin yoga practice, you could come into, it's almost like a little bit of rotation and lateral, where you bring your left hand towards your left foot. And then maybe you could reach that right arm over, maybe. So go for something where you can stay. You know, so taking that right arm over, that's a strong, strong stretch. So you're very welcome to stay sitting up. You're very welcome, as Inga is beautifully demonstrating, you could use the left hand as a support for the head, or you could use a block or a bolster. And then, as I said, we're not staying here in this, I call this half dragonfly. I know sometimes it's called straddle as well. Just going to be here for 1 more minute. So really kind of analyze yourself. Can you stay for another minute? If it's too much, ease the edge. If you're quite comfortable, continue as you are. So 1 more minute, please. And then from here, slowly ease way up to center. Take a breath or two at center. And then use the hands to help. So holding that right knee with the right hand, left hand on that right foot. Now take the right leg out wide. So we're coming, for a moment, we'll come back into dragonfly or Upavista Konasana. So the right leg is out wide. And now we'll do the external rotation using the hands. So the left side, so picking up the left knee, the left foot. So see if you can bring the left toe towards your big nose. Just see if that might be possible. As I said, just simply holding the foot is great. Maybe you can bring the toe. So rather than cheating and taking the nose to toe, see if you can stay sitting up and bring the toe to nose. So exploring this kind of external rotation. Maybe remember when we did in Eye of the Needle, and looking at which side felt more mobile. Maybe you can also notice it doing this. And then bring that foot, so the left foot, into the inner right thigh. So very important, no discomfort in the knee, in the left knee. If there's discomfort in the knee, you could always try taking the foot further away. And some of you will also know that option of like using a belt. Remember when we looked at hugging the knee to the chest, you could use a belt in the back of the knee. That might be helpful. And then the hands behind you. So analyze. I sometimes talk about assessing the data. I'm trying to be 21st century. So assessing the data, but also that reminds me of Star Trek. I'm a big fan of Star Trek, Next Generation. So Data was a character in Next Generation. So assessing your data, maybe you decide to stay just like so. And of course, the second side, we're aided because we had the data from the first time. So you could stay like so, or you could go down the middle. So Fiona, I know you asked a question. So if you want to, if your question hasn't been like properly answered, feel free to ask it again. So you could go down the middle, or you could add this, lateral and rotation. So this side, you'd be bringing your right hand into your inner right foot, and then maybe you got the like really long arms, and you can take that left arm over, and maybe you're using your right hand as a support for your head, reaching that left arm over. So do what you need to do. This is the priority. In terms of doing what you need to do, so remember how we started right at the beginning, and I talked about like turning towards. Let go of the, oh, this is what I should do. We're kind of feeling our way into the body, and then as we come towards the last minute, what can be interesting? What happens in your mind at the thought of being here for another minute? That's the question. What happens? Because say if there's disquiet, if your mind a bit like, oh no, another minute, I'm being ripped apart. Ease from edge. Remember that quote I said right at the beginning of, the idea of not pushing or pulling blew my mind. This is not strong pushing, strong pulling. This is much more about staying stillness. Or continue as you are, or maybe coming a little bit deeper. We're each different. And then this key, staying still. Just a little bit less than a minute, please. Staying still. And now from here, slowly take your time, releasing. When you eventually, so avoid like abrupt movements. So really kind of taking our time, being yin in transitions. When you come to center, so again, we could bring the hands, so the left hand, so left knee, just take that leg out wide. Just take a breath or two, back, just momentarily back into dragonfly. And then what we're going to do from dragonfly, what I'd recommend, so dragonfly, inner thighs, external rotation of the hips, some various movements of the spine. Bring your hands under your knees. Thank you, Lee. Exactly. Hug the knees into your chest. Let's all just take a few moments, just simply giving ourselves a hug. And this can be one of the tragedies, one of the many tragedies of what's currently happening, of losing kind of physical contact, and as human beings, we're intensely tribal. So just kind of taking a moment, maybe you could close your eyes, maybe. Just kind of feeling this sensation of giving ourselves a hug, giving ourselves a hug. So the focus is very much on feeling the body, and for a variety of different reasons, just helping us to be more here, enabling us to be more attentive to the body. So now releasing, and then could you, so notice the question mark, could you perhaps sit on your heels? So sitting on your heels, could this be a possibility? Sitting on your heels. So it puts the feet into extension, sitting on the heels. If this might feel a little bit too much for a knee, what you could try is taking, so yeah, use lots of props, use whatever you need to use. So you could try putting a block. So if you've got a lot of mobility in your body, using props can be very useful. So you could try putting a block in between your hips and your heels. Another suggestion would be taking a blanket. So these are great blankets, by the way. These are yoga blankets from Yoga Matters, and they've got a lot of what could you call it, shape. And then if you've got a blanket, you could roll up the blanket and place it below the ankle. So that then reduces the angle. So if you've got too much mobility, and there is definitely truth in too much mobility, then what you could do, rather than like pressing the tops of feet to the floor, you could put a blanket below the ankles, as an example, or of course a cushion. And then maybe you have something close by, like a yoga brick or Anna Jones. So honestly, I'm not getting any commission from Anna Jones or Yoga Matters. Yoga Matters are still open and doing business, so feel free to get, because I think we'll be here for a while yet. Maybe some of you have got a sandbag or a bag of oats. And then, so you're sitting, and if sitting on the heels isn't working for you, you could always try kneeling like this. And then if kneeling feels uncomfortable for your knees, you could try tucking under the toes, because that alters the angle of the kneecap to the ground. And then if you had a weight, maybe you could lift it above your head. So being conscious of many maybes, definitely feel free to keep the arms down. One of the pluses of, yeah, that looks good. That looks good, Inga. One of the pluses is if you've got something like a bit heavier above your head, like say a sandbag or a cookery book, it kind of adds that, what's the description, like edge of danger. Because you don't know, if you drop a light sandbag on your head, then that might be quite painful. Whereas if it's like just a cushion, then it probably wouldn't be so painful. So being attentive. This is something, honestly, I do this a lot in my own practice, of like holding something above my head. And another thing I do a lot is, which is kind of like slightly different direction, I hold a belt, a yoga belt above my head, and I pull it apart. Just ways of exercising the shoulders, the arms. And you'll be pleased to hear this is the most yang action. So definitely feel free to keep the arms down if you wish. This is the most yang thing we're doing in the entire practice. And now from here, slowly, slowly, slowly bring, if you've raised something above your head, bring it down. Place it beside you. Placing the hands on the thighs. So knees in flexion, strong stretch of the feet, sitting up. Remember, if it's feeling too much, try blocks, maybe trying something under the ankles, just sitting up. And then what we're going to look from here. So I would call this, by sitting on the heels, so my big toes are touching, I would call this putting the hips into neutral. So what we're going to look at from here is the possibility, notice possibility, of leaning back. If this is already beginning, if you feel like one of your knees is starting to protest, if it's like, oh, this is going a bit too strong, or if you've got some existing discomfort in your lower back, I think it would be better for you to come onto the front of your body in a shape some of you might know as Sphinx. So if your lower back feels a bit sore, if your knees are starting to protest, then you could come into Sphinx. Otherwise, you could take the hands behind you and you could just lean into the hands. If you can, keep the sitting on the heels and the big toes touching. Of course, you can let the knees go as wide as they wish. For many, that can be helpful here. See if you can keep the knees pressing down though. Of course, you can use bolsters, cushions. Maybe some of you can come onto your forearms. I know some of you are able to come bringing the head, even the shoulders, flat onto the floor. So doing what you need to do. So if you're going backwards, allow, so yin quality, allow the knees to go as wide as they wish. Though keeping this kind of contact between the knees and the ground. If the knees have just come up like a couple of centimeters, that's fine. But if the knees have come up substantially, then I would recommend you ease the back bend. Also be conscious, you have to come out of this posture. So avoid being, what's the word, too gung-ho. We all need an exit strategy. As much as we need an exit strategy from lockdown, we need an exit strategy. And then, you know, we've been practicing together already for quite a long time. We're trying to get the feel. I sometimes talk about various qualities. You know, I've kind of already talked about this idea of, you know, being quite soft in the yin practice. So like, say if you're clenching your jaw, That's a signal the stretch is getting too strong, being quite soft. If you're in Sphinx, so that's with the forearms on the floor, and you'd like to accentuate the stretch, you could straighten your arms, you lift up higher. Some of you might know this as Cobra or Bhujangasana. If you're going for that option, I'd tend to take the arms the width of the mat and turn the hands out a little bit. If you've gone back and you feel really comfortable going back, you could always hold the elbows over the head. That will then bring a stretch into the armpits and the chest. Whatever you're doing, could there be this real quality of being fairly soft? And of course, another quality we require for yin yoga is patience, which is actually something is really helpful in lockdown days. We need to be patient. So talk about these as qualities for the yin practice: soft, patience, kindness. And this is a real thing to kind of drop in. Am I being kind to myself? And we are so good at beating ourselves up, whether we're in the UK, whether we're outside the UK, we are so good at beating ourselves up. Like, what's the word? Flagellation. So kindness. And then, of course, you know, we need effort. It's like the saying, we need effort to get out of bed each morning. And some days we might not want to get out of bed. We need that little bit of effort. And then just as we come towards the last minute, can we be curious about what we're experiencing in the body? So this is another way of getting into the body. Like, say if you've gone back, so I'd call this posture saddle. Some of you might know it as reclining hero or version of. You know, do you feel it more in your right thigh or your left thigh? Being curious, can I be still for one more minute? So if you're in Sphinx or Seal, what I'd like to do, take your time, very slowly come to lying flat on the floor. If you've gone back, being conscious of the exit strategy, so avoid like twisting, please keep breathing, come up, and now you also come to being flat on the front of the body, flat on the front of the body, and then reach the arms out wide. Say if a woman's pregnant, what would be helpful is, say, having something below the top of her thighs, just kind of give a little bit of space for her tummy. But everyone, if you can, come to being flat on the floor. So depending on your circumstances, so we're each in our own manifestation of circumstances, maybe you could reach your arms out wide. So you're lying like the tops of the feet, the front of the thighs, the tummy, the chest, reaching the arms out wide. And then could you turn your head and look towards your right hand? Could you turn your head and look towards your right hand? And then could you, from here, could you now slide your right knee towards your right hip and your right foot stays on the floor? So that's a bit confusing. You could look at me. So the right knee, so arms reaching out wide, the right knee coming towards the right hip, the right foot staying on the floor, looking towards the right hand. So this is a posture, I sometimes call it frog meets Sphinx. So we have right angles between the upper body and the right thigh and the right shin. And what I tend to suggest is keeping the right foot in a little bit of flexion. So that's a suggestion. Right foot staying in a little bit of flexion. And then, if you can, keeping the arms just as they are, keeping that right leg just as it is, remember just noticing, lift up the head and now look towards the left hand. Lift up the head, look towards the left hand. I see a cat. Maybe the cat's come to say hello to Badger, looking towards the left hand, just noticing. And now, keeping the head just as it is, bring your right leg, I see a cat's tail now. Bring your right leg back alongside your left leg. And then bring your left knee towards your left hip. That's it, Veronica, lovely. Left knee towards left hip. Left foot, what I'd recommend, the left foot in that little bit of mild flexion. So frog meets sphinx. I know sometimes this can feel a bit uncomfortable for the inner knee. So if it feels uncomfortable for your inner knee, you okay, Inga? If it feels a bit uncomfortable for your inner knee, then you could try padding. So looking for those right angles. So the left foot's on the floor, the left knee towards the left hip, bring your left knee towards your left hip. And then, if you can, keeping that left leg just as it is, now turn the head and look towards the right hand. Turn the head, look towards the right hand. Just noticing, what might you notice? And then bring the left leg alongside the right leg. And then, as smoothly as you can. So it'd probably be helped if you bring your hands now beside your hips, as smoothly as you can, elegantly roll onto your back and bring your knees into your chest. So we're back onto lying on the back. So hugging the knees to the chest, hugging the knees to the chest. So you could perhaps interlace your fingers. You could hold right knee with right hand, left knee with left hand. Remember that point from before? If there's any discomfort in the back, in the knees, then you could try the hands pressing into the back of the knees. So hugging the knees to the chest. Just as a way of balancing the back bending. So by hugging the knees to the chest, this is supported forward bend. And then what we're going to do from here. So obviously depending on like what material you have close by. So maybe you have a bolster close by, maybe you have a block or something. We're going to now lift our legs up. So bolsters are great. If you have a bolster, that's great. But placing some, so we're lifting our legs up. Another suggestion here could be placing a belt around your ankles. So lifting the legs up, please. So this is a yin inversion. So if you can, moving in a way almost like that minimizes disruption. You know, this point about avoiding like abrupt movements, almost like we could flow from the hugging the knees to chest, and then we've taken our legs upwards, so yin inversion. And then what we're doing in yin inversion, looking for a way to reduce effort. And this is one of the, I call it like the radicalism of yin yoga. We actually look for ways to reduce effort, and many of us are very familiar with that kind of a practice where we're trying to achieve poses, a practice that's much more about striving. So here, reducing effort, and what I personally find for myself, as some of you, what a lot of you are already doing, is that rather than the legs being vertical, they're slightly off the vertical. You might talk about maybe an 80-degree angle. And then of course, you're welcome to slightly soften the knees if that is a way that could be helpful for you. So less effort. And then, even though everything's upside down, like we're so accustomed to the head being on the top, the head's on top, the head's in command. Right now, the head's at the bottom, the feet are at the top. How's your breathing? That's a question. How's my breath? And the breathing being this way of actually altering the way we are. You know, there's a real, profound influence on our well-being through how we're breathing. And then, just coming towards the last couple of minutes here, I know many of you are familiar with this, and it's something that's worth repeating. And this is actually from one of the Buddhist texts. So this is at least 2,500 years old. It's the Mahayana Nikaya, that whatever a person frequently thinks upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. Whatever a person frequently thinks upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. So could we, just as a suggestion, and we did this at the beginning, could we, we're just here for another minute, could we really feel gratitude for this body? And I know there are aches, heartbreaks. You know, these days can be incredibly difficult, you know, for those without gardens, for those more isolated, these days can be incredibly difficult. It's not about denying, it's not about deluding ourselves. But all of us practicing together this afternoon, wherever we are, we all experience what you might describe as basic healthiness. I know there are illnesses, I know we all have issues, but we also have enough healthiness to participate together in this practice. So could we just in the last few breaths really kind of, oh, wow, I'm grateful for this body. Because we can be so good, I talked about beating ourselves up, we can be so good at seeing what's wrong and not realizing what's going well. So now from here, what I suggest in terms of the transition, I suggest that you soften your knees towards your chest, and thus you then allow the heels towards the hips. And then if you have something below your sacrum area, like a block, a bolster, bring the hands onto that and just simply push it away from your hips. And then bring the feet either onto the block, the bolster, or onto the ground. And then just to kind of, I'm really into this idea of like fueling or feeding curiosity. Curiosity is a muscle, gratitude is a muscle. Just being curious. We did this before. Actually, this time, let's do the exercise. So take your right index finger and gently close your right nostril. Gently close your right nostril. Just take 2 or 3 breaths in and out of your left nostril. So observing the flow of air in and out of your left nostril. And then release. Give enough time, so this is important, give enough time for the right nostril to relax. And then changing sides. So the left index finger, gently closing the left nostril. 2 or 3 breaths in and out of the right nostril. So noticing. If you can notice a difference, roll to the side of the more active nostril. If you can notice the difference. If the difference is undetectable, then just roll to the right. So whether you rolled left or right, just take a few breaths having rolled over, whether you rolled left or right, a few breaths having rolled over. And then take your time. Remember that image from earlier, the bear after hibernating, coming out of the cave, or another image I sometimes use is like, imagine you're moving through clouds of butterflies, just slowly, take your time, come up to sitting, and then what we're going to do from here, we're going to do kind of similar posture to what we were just doing, but a little bit more of an angle perhaps. We're going to do a yin pose. It's sometimes called caterpillar. If you're familiar with more dynamic practices, it's sometimes be called Paschimottanasana. So if a woman's pregnant, she would take her feet towards the width of the mat. You're very welcome, of course, to sit on something. Again, coming back to this idea of pelvic tilt. You're also welcome to use a bolster below your thighs. Another way of doing this pose, if you wished, is you could, if your energy levels are really low, if there's any discomfort in your back, you could take your legs up the wall. A great way of doing this posture. So if you've not seen this way of doing this pose before, and you do a lot of yoga, I'd recommend just giving it a go, just seeing how it feels. And I actually, in my Ashtanga practice, when I'm teaching Ashtanga, will do this pose like this. If you actually take the arms below the thighs and you hold the elbows like this. So you're holding your elbows, and then just explore for yourself. Could you fold further forwards? Of course, you could use a support for the head. Maybe there's a handy brick or bolster. Could you, so by folding forwards, that intensifies the stretch on the back of the thighs. Remember from earlier, maybe you've gone into that dialogue of, remember I talked about grabbing and pulling or digging in. So particularly if you've got a lot of mobility in your body, if you're hypermobile and you've not come across this before, give it a go. Just try it out. This kind of digging, it's like literally digging your buttocks in. And then just easing your way forwards. So there's flexion. Support, so especially if you've got any neck or shoulder issues, support your head. Remember, you're very welcome just to keep holding the elbows below the thighs. And then remember this idea of like practice, rather like, oh, lengthen, lengthen, lengthen hamstrings. Relationship to self. So personally, I really feel that I benefit a lot from yin. Like I am not a natural yin person. I'm a bit of a kind of striver. And I remember the first time I was doing yin, I was definitely yang in my yin. And I was pushing. And I'm not saying that pushing is wrong. What I'm trying to encourage is more balance. And, if the truth is told, for very many of us, our lives are out of balance. I sometimes feel like we've been hamsters on wheels but not only are we on the wheels, we're hamsters and we're like down 15 strong espressos. The wheels has been spinning. And I know this is definitely true for some people. Even in lockdown, the wheels are really spinning. Maybe you frontline work in terms of, say, working in shops, delivery drivers, healthcare workers. The wheels can still be really spinning. Looking after kids at home, looking after elderly relatives, those wheels can definitely be spinning. And also for many of us, there's been this slowing down, as I talked about earlier. I've not been in a vehicle for more than 7 weeks. A real slowing down. And then in terms of this slowing down, so we come into the last 2 minutes. When we slow down, we can be, there's more space, literally space. That could, well, maybe be a bit more reflective. And then we could ask ourselves in this space, what would better than before look like? What would better than before look like? So we're here for another minute. So now from here, slowly let's soften our caterpillars, slowly come up to center, and then just take a few moments, just kind of a little bit of easing back into the hands. So after the forward bending, just easing back into the hands, so releasing around like the back of the thighs, lower back going from forward to a little bit of a back bend. And then what we're going to do from here, what I'd like you to do is getting your stuff, however you're manifesting stuff. So maybe your stuff is like a cushion. Maybe you have a bolster. Placing the bolster or the cushion against your right hip. So the legs initially are straight. If you have a cushion, maybe you could have 2 cushions or 3 cushions. If you have yoga blocks, maybe you could take or cookery books. You want to try and build this up as much as you can. So it's getting a bit like a bolster, for those of you who know yoga bolster. So against your right hip, please. And now, from here, so bolster or cushions against your right hip, bring your heels towards your bottom. Bring your heels towards your bottom. So just in terms of angles, this is a right angle, 90-degree angle, heels towards your bottom. And then turn the upper body. Maybe you might imagine there's a light in your navel shining down towards the cushion or the bolster. And then just very slowly. So no rush, no hurry, avoiding abrupt movements, just very slowly allow the upper body to come towards, onto, almost like you're coming into the bolster or the cushion or the support. Personally, what I do here is I turn my head in the same direction as the knees, so face in the same direction. If you've got a lot of mobility in your body, you might actually prefer turning the head the other way. So this is bolster rotation. So remembering, I mentioned a little bit earlier about the qualities of yin. So in this pose, for many of us, we really can touch that quality of soften. So we soften, bolster rotation. So if a woman's pregnant, she'd be keeping space for her tummy. And then as we soften, so staying now, can we just allow ourselves to be for a few minutes? So not, one of the great things with this posture, I think, is a real teacher of non-striving. So just allowing ourselves to be. There's a meditation teacher I studied with, Kamala Sheila, and he told this story about when he was a child. He was outside and it started raining heavily. And he didn't have didn't have a raincoat or umbrella, young child. There wasn't anywhere close by for him to shelter. And he said that he can still remember having this insight. So he's a young child, having this insight that his resistance to the rain was causing him more suffering than the rain itself. So there is the inevitable difficulty, there is the lockdown, there's these restrictions being placed on our movement. So this is, for many of us, and each person has their own individual experience, but for many of us, this can be quite uncomfortable. I found that story from Kamala really quite insightful about, sometimes it's more of our mental resistance to the experience than the experience itself that's causing us the most discomfort. We're going to be here for just another minute. Just allow yourself to be. Staying still. One more minute. So now from here, remembering that bear, the clouds of butterflies, we're simply going to change sides and moving in a way that causes the least disruption. So what I'd recommend is perhaps keeping the bolster, the cushions just as they are. You ease your way up. Maybe you do a graceful pirouetting on your bottom. Maybe you come up onto your hands and knees. So now the bolster's against your left hip. And then with the bolster against the left hip, getting this, so that there's a decent rotation of the upper body. Getting this rotation, imagining perhaps there's a light in your navel, also a light in your sternum, shining down onto the cushions of the bolster. the heels have come towards the buttocks, the hips, and then slowly, slowly allowing yourself to come down towards, onto, almost like you come into the bolster. Turning the head whichever way you wish to turn. So looking here. So this isn't a posture to achieve, this is a posture to be. So, like say, constructive rest, really a great place to get that sense of rest and release. And when we're more in these places, rest or release, there is the potential to be more clear. You know, anxieties literally fog our vision, crowd our brains. Our minds get dominated. So doing practices where there is, okay, rest, release. I love the dog, Ola. Rest and release. It's great seeing all these pets come in. Rest and release. Badra's still sleeping on the pile of blankets and bolsters. Rest and release. And then back in the, I think it's something like 4th century BCE, so 2,500 years ago, there was a Taoist teacher. So Taoism is China, that's where it emerged from. Taoist teacher calls him out Zhuangzi. He described life as 10,000 sorrows, 10,000 joys. So 10,000 does not mean 10,000. 10,000 just means limitless. You know, I feel that when we can get this realization that, so this inevitable challenges in life, as so many of us are currently experiencing, and also there are silver linings in every cloud. So as we come towards the last minute, I talked a little bit earlier about that kind of idea of, well, what could better than before look like? It's a good question. What could better than before look like? You know, we have this chance to, in some ways, like almost like redefine, or really look at what we're doing with our lives. And then just in the last minute, just in this, you know, I love this pose. We rest in that knowledge, real knowledge, life. 10,000 sorrows, 10,000 joys. One more minute. So now from here, taking your time, we're simply going to come to lying down. So what I would suggest is again moving it away We talk about minimizing disruption and maximizing comfort. So if you can, placing something below the knees. If you can, perhaps a cushion under the head. Maybe you have a bag of lentils you could put on your tummy. Maybe you have an eye pillow that you could place over the eyes. So by having something below your knees, whether it's a cookery book or a yoga bolster or a rolled up yoga mat, that's just a way of giving some more release to the back, as also is the support below the head. The weight on the tummy, if that feels comfortable for you, can be a way of grounding. The cover for the eyes can be a way of lessening stimulation. Definitely feel free to place blankets, as many blankets as you wish over the body. So coming to lying down, so remember, maximizing comfort. Maximizing comfort. Coming to lying down, maximizing comfort. And then literally just letting the body spread out onto the ground. So the body spreading like space between the hands and the hips, as an example. Space between the heels. Space between the shoulders and the ears. Space between the upper and lower jaw. And then this releasing into space. Remember that poem from Mary Oliver? Today I'm flying low and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple. So now from here, first of all, give yourself permission to stay. So maybe being in this shape and it's like really, it's like, oh, I just want to stay. So one of the great advantages of practicing in this way, you can stay for as long as you like. You can snore as loudly as you like, if you so wish. If you're going to come up out of this posture, really take your time. So yin, moving yin in a yin practice. So practice a little bit of shifting of the head from side to side, just like minimal movements, maybe kind of touching the fingers, like the thumbs and the index fingers touching. Perhaps some wriggling of the toes. And then consciously taking your time in the transition. Please take your time in the transition. Take at least a few breaths with the feet flat on the floor. So if you had a bolster or something else below your knees, you could rest the feet on that. Just a few breaths. As this is a yin yoga practice, we'll now roll onto our left. Before rolling over though, deciding for yourself how you can best support your head. Could be with the hands in prayer position. Maybe there's a handy cushion or a block. Rolling onto your left side, so left shoulder, left hip. Draw the knees towards the chest. Soften the chin towards the chest. And then repeating what we did at the beginning. Checking in, turning towards. You know, right now for yourself, how are things within? It's like a inner contemplation. And of course, within, you know, there's the physicality and there's head and heart. How are things within? And then from here, taking your time, slowly rise up to sitting, come up to sitting. Remember from the start, sit in whichever way works well for you, whichever way works well for you. So gratitude and appreciation are as much muscles as quadriceps and hamstrings. Bring the hands to the heart. So I'm very grateful for you all being here. I'm very grateful to Paula for organizing this. You know, this is community in action, supporting Paula, supporting the studio. Just soften the chin towards the chest, almost like it's like we're consciously bringing our brains, our heads, towards our hearts. Could you have the eyes closed? And could we be grateful for the blessing, this body? And could we be grateful for the privilege of practicing? So feeling this body and acknowledging that through tools such as this practice, these can be ways of helping us to maintain our equanimity in turbulent times, encouraging clarity and insight. So if the eyes are closed, gently raise your eyelids, keeping the gaze down, and then eventually raising the head. Thank you so much.